GRE, and that goes with your reading comprehension. On the GRE verbal reasoning section, reading comprehension plays a very important role. But on the reading comprehension, there are two types of passages that you can expect. You do get the short passages and you do get the long passages. The short passages is what I'm concentrating on today, because the short passages deal with what is called as most often the critical reasoning questions. So today we are going to be concentrating on the critical reasoning questions that appear on the GRE. Now let's say on a typical verbal reasoning section, you get around about 4 reading comprehension passages. In that, you can expect at least 2 of them to be short passages. These short passages typically have just 1 para, and you might get 1 question most often. Sometimes you might even get 2 questions from them. Now the critical reasoning questions are based on what is called as critical reading of the passage. So what kind of questions we are going to get, how are we going to tackle them, and how they are relevant also to your analytical writing is what I'm going to talk to you today. So what are these critical reasoning questions and what is this critical reading passages? First of all, before we go to critical reasoning and critical reading, let's discuss first and foremost reasoning, and from there we'll talk about what is this critical reasoning. So what do we do when we are reasoning? What is it we do when we reason? Yes? Try to understand. Reasoning is not just understanding. Reasoning is thinking logically. When we have a set of facts before us, we try to analyze it, we try to understand it, we try to solve the information so that we get an answer. So when we use the process of thinking to come to a logical conclusion, that process of thinking that leads to a logical conclusion is called as reasoning. Now that we have with us not just reasoning but critical reasoning. So what is this critical reasoning that is going to help us to do the critical reasoning passages? Critical. Most often we think about the word critical as criticizing. It isn't. Critical reasoning is more connected with what you would find, for example, a film critic doing. Before you go to watch a movie, many times you read the film review. Who writes the film review? The film critic. Now the film critic writes the review, and what do you find in the review? What exactly do you find in a review, in any typical film review? Content of the movie. Just that? You are reading the film review because you want to know the story of the movie? Overall? Yes, assessment. This film critic is a person who writes an assessment of the movie, and the first thing you notice is how many star rating has been given to the film. So in order to write the film review, what the film critic does is he writes a critic, which is nothing but an assessment or evaluation of the contents of the movie using what? Using his knowledge of movie making. When you have knowledge of a subject, you can evaluate it, right? If I place an unknown painting in front of you, none of you have any kind of knowledge about paintings, you will not be able to judge the painting. So this assessment or evaluation, this judgment comes only with knowledge and information. So critical reasoning is this evaluation assessment that we do based on knowledge or information we have. Now this critical reasoning, critical evaluation, this powers of assessment you apply in 2 places on the GRE. One, in the short passages that ask you to critically evaluate the contents of the passage, use your reasoning to find out an answer for it. Second, using the same critical reasoning, you apply this type of evaluative parts in your analytical writing as well. In the analytical writing, in the analysis of an argument, use this critical reasoning in order to assess the contents of an argument and to write an assessment of it. In the analysis of an issue, use this critical reasoning in order to evaluate an issue and write your opinion and write your let us say own opinion or agreement with it. So in both, you're using your critical judgment or critical evaluation. You see, when a person goes to a court of law, the judge sits on judgment. Every Tom and Dick and Harry, every lawyer cannot become a judge. Who becomes a judge? One, he must have a master's in law. Second, he must have many years of experience teaching in the lower and the high courts. These are rules. The reason why it is insisted that this person is practicing as a lawyer for many years is because you get insight into any subject knowledge, and then only you can evaluate or assess that particular subject. So when a judge sits on judgment, he must have in-depth knowledge or insight of the legal laws of our nation. Therefore, he can pass a judgment. Now, for you to have critical reasoning, the ability to assess, evaluate the contents of the passages on the verbal reasoning, and for you to evaluate and assess the contents of an argument and write an essay on the analytical writing, you must have some degree of expertise or proficiency on one aspect, and that is critical reasoning. But on the GRE, the critical reasoning that you use, this expertise, is not on a film. You're not using your knowledge on a film to assess a film. In critical reasoning, in GRE, you're not using this knowledge on a legal law. On GRE, you're most often asked to use your critical reasoning in evaluating and assessing an argument. Your assessment, your evaluation is pertinent to the argument. So, today, in order for us to learn how to do the critical reasoning questions, we are going to put in a strong foundation on understanding what an argument is. So, let's put it this way. Critical reasoning, and specific to critical reasoning, we are going to connect it with the argument. So, let's ask ourselves, what is an argument? You know, in everyday language, what do we consider to be an argument? When you say I had an argument with my friend, I had an argument with somebody, what do you mean by that? Yes, you had some kind of disagreement, verbal conflict, a disagreement, right? That is a normal everyday definition of an argument. But as far as critical reasoning, logic is concerned, an argument is not a fight. An argument is a situation where you are putting forward a claim or a conclusion and trying to convince the other person of your claim or conclusion by giving him or her suitable reasons. In a court of law, when a person is arrested and he is sent for trial, there are two major role players here who are part of this whole situation. You have the defendant's lawyer, you have the prosecuting lawyer. The prosecutor is the police lawyer who tells the court, who announces in the court that his intention is to prove this person to be guilty. Whereas the defendant's lawyer, who is appointed by the accused, he claims in the courts that we intend to prove that this person is innocent and could not have committed the crime. What do they do after that? Each lawyer presents an argument. What do? They present an argument by putting evidences and facts before the court. If this lawyer, the prosecutor, puts some evidences, the defendant's lawyer tries to first of all weaken those evidences and put something additional that will support his side. And the prosecutor will try to weaken the facts set forward by the defendant's lawyer and put some additional facts that will support his side. At the end of the day, the judge has to evaluate all the evidences. Based on the facts presented, he passes a judgment based on the legal prudence of the jurisprudence of the law. So here you see, an argument therefore as set forward in a court of law is meant to convince the judge of a certain claim. The claims made here is One says he is guilty, the other says it is not guilty. So in any argument, there is always a claim. Or an argument could also be reaching a conclusion. Now when you make a claim, when you reach a conclusion, the other person doesn't have to, he doesn't have to believe you just like that. So what do you have to do? What do you have to do? You have to give some reasonable evidences, facts to support your claim. So if I were to come to this class and claim I'm the best singer here, do you believe me? No. I tell you that I can teach you your verbal reasoning section very well, therefore I'm a fantastic singer. Do you still believe me? That means what kind of reasons must be offered to make that conclusion or claim logical? Relevant reasons. The reasons that should be given must be appropriate to the conclusion, not any evidences, not any reasons. Reasons that are connected with the facts, right? In everyday life, there are so many situations where we are actually in an argument. We may not know it. For example, you go to attend an interview. Yes, you go to attend an interview. What do you do? What do you do on the day you go to attend the interview? You prepare yourself. You groom yourself. You present yourself neatly and properly. And you go there with what? What do you carry in your hand? What do you carry in your hand? Yes, your portfolio, your certificates, your experience records, your academic, yes, everything you carry here. Okay, now you go and stand there waiting to be called for the interview. The moment you stand there, you become a part of that group who's waiting for the interview. Directly or indirectly, you're making a claim. What is it you're claiming? The claim you're making is, I am the best person for this job. This is what you're saying. It is an implicit claim. The moment you go and stand there for the interview, it implies that you are saying, I'm out of all these people who are gathered here, I'm the best person for the job. Now you're called for the interview. You go and very pleasantly wish the interviewers, and then you're asked to sit down. You sit down politely and you present your portfolio, your file, which has all your certificates. Now, this particular job requires, let's say, a mechanical engineer with 3 years of experience in a particular relevant field in automobile engineering. So you have the relevant experience, you have the relevant certificates. So what do? The first thing is you give the certificates proving that you are suitable for the job and you have those 3 years of relevant experience. After which you are asked questions. Some questions are posed on the subject, on your experience. What do? You answer them. You answer intelligently. You answer, in a manner which is clear and precise, in a pleasing manner. After all this done, the interviewer will say, thank you, we'll call you back. 3 days later, you get a call saying, we are calling you for the first round of appointments. Please come and join us within a week. What did you do? You won your argument. That claim that you made by attending that interview, that I am the best person for the job, you were able to convince the other person about it. So in order to convince this person of the claim, you didn't go empty-handed. What did you carry? You carried your certificates, your academic certificates, your experience certificates. Apart from this, what did you do? What did you do? You presented yourself very attractively, very confidently. That means this certificates was confirmed by, one, the way you answered the questions that were given to you, thereby confirming what the certificate saying is true. If you have experience, that means that experience is confirmed by your knowledge. Second, These answers and your appearance is meant to do what? Is meant to illustrate the fact that you are the best person for the job. So what you have done here is you have given your certificates, your records, which gives statistical information. I have got 80% in my academic percentages. I have got not 3 years, I have got 4 years of experience in this particular field. I have this kind of programming done. I have been, associated with these kind of projects. So these are the relevant things that you are using as a statistical information to support your claim. Plus, by showing yourself to be having the relevant, let us say, knowledge, you are illustrating that you are good for the job and you are able to therefore win the argument. So in any argument, when a claim is made, that claim has to be supported with relevant facts. These facts can be in the form of observations, because the boss who's sitting there is observing you, is looking at you. Are you able to talk confidently? Do you have the relevant exposure? Is your reply confident enough? Is this person pleasing enough? Will he fit into our own job specification? So that observation makes a very important role. Your appearance, your way of presenting yourself are the illustrations that you are putting forward. The records and certificates are your statistical and other kind of evidences that is meant to prove a point. Now all these things that you have presented in order to convince the person of your claim in any argument, we call them as premises. What do we call them? Premises. So any typical argument has two basic components. Any typical argument makes a claim or reaches a conclusion. But in order to make that claim or conclusion convincing, this argument has to give suitable, relevant premises. So what are premises once again? Premises are the facts, observations, statistical informations, records, evidences that are used in order to confirm the claim or the conclusion reached by an argument. So any typical argument will have C plus P as a basic component. Let me once again have it from you. What is C? The claim or a conclusion. Now, you go outside and you make an observation. You look at the sky. It looks very cloudy. You look at the weather forecast. It says we can expect rains today, later in the day. Based on that, you conclude that I may not be able to go for a picnic today. So conclusion is reached on the basis of facts. A claim is made which is usually also based on premises, where you are trying to convince the other person of a certain claim that you have made. So let us look at a typical argument as you would analyze or let's say assess. Everyday situation again. Let's say you're watching TV today. When you're watching TV, let's say you're watching some kind of an animal channel or whatever, Discovery Channel, and you got to know something about Australia. And from there you got to know about this particular type of animals that live there. Now let's say that you were watching a program on a specific species of bats which lives in Australia. From there you gathered the information that all bats are mammals. This information, you watched the program and you gathered from that. From your childhood, there is another nugget of information that is there in your mind that you know already. And that information is that all mammals are warm-blooded. This is an information that you already have right from your school. Based on these two premises, what is the conclusion you can reach? 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 now. Therefore, what would you say about all bats? All bats are mammals. We know that already. So what's the conclusion? Yes. Therefore, all bats are warm-blooded is the conclusion you have reached. Now let's say I present this argument before you and I ask you to critically evaluate. That means, what is the meaning of critical evaluation? You have to study the conclusion and ask yourself, do I believe this conclusion based on the facts given? So I'm asking you, do you believe this conclusion that all bats are warm-blooded based on these facts? Yes, you will, provided premise number 1 is 100% true and premise number 2 is 100% true. Then there cannot be any doubt about the conclusion that all bats are warm-blooded. This is 100% acceptable. So you would say this is a logical conclusion. I have no problems with this conclusion. But let's say when you are watching this program on TV, you did not get to know about all bats. You got to know about this particular type of species of bats which is living in Australia. So the best you could understand from here is that some bats are mammals. Okay, now some bats are mammals, but you do know all mammals are warm-blooded. Now if I were to give you a conclusion like this, therefore all bats are warm-blooded, would you accept this conclusion to be logical? Would you discard this conclusion totally? What would you do? Yes. There are going to be instances where facts presented to you don't completely support the conclusion. Therefore, in this instance, you don't discard the conclusion. You modify the conclusion to suit the facts. You got the point? Here, therefore, instead of saying all bats are warm-blooded, you would say I can't accept it because I don't know about all bats, but I do know that some of these bats living in Australia are mammals. Therefore, these bats that are there in Australia are definitely warm-blooded, would be your modification. Now, is this argument logical? Yes, it is. By modifying the conclusion, you have made it logical. You know, I go to a birthday party and I make an observation. I see the beautiful decoration and the balloons and stuff like that. And I turn to my friend and I say, the room was so beautiful because all the balloons in the room are pink in color. Now my friend might be a little more observant and she might say, you know, there are some blue balloons near the, the dais where the birthday boy is, cutting the cake. So what do? I say, the room looks so beautifully decorated because most of the balloons in the room are pink in color. So logic is not about discarding. It's about modifying, altering and still making it logical. But when will this argument become utterly illogical would be if I were to say something like this. Having told you about bats, that all bats are mammals and all mammals are warm-blooded, I end up saying, therefore all cats are. Here, what would you do? There is no way of redeeming this argument. There's no way you can make this argument work for you. The only thing you can do is discard this argument, saying there's utterly no logic. It's like my saying, I'm a good singer because I can teach you the verbal reasoning section. There's no connection between the facts. So in any argument, the syllogism means the sequence of the ideas, the facts that are presented must logically lead to the conclusion. They must be appropriate, relevant, and suitable to the conclusion reached. So when you're critically evaluating the content of an argument, you must be able to see whether the facts presented are enough to be able to completely and totally support the conclusion. Now, such kind of premises which says all bats are mammals or a bat is a mammal, these are called as generalizations. Generalizations are statements that are meant to be applicable to all. Many times particularizations can also be made. One specific instance can be taken leading to a conclusion. For example, if I make a generalization saying that software engineers working for Wipro for more than 5 years draw a minimum salary of 10 lakhs per annum. Gopal is working for Wipro for the last 5 years as a software engineer. Therefore, his salary must be very high, minimum 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs per annum. Here, the first statement is a generalization. Software engineers working for Wipro for more than 5 years draw a very high salary, above 10 lakhs. That is a generalization. The specification is one person, Gopal, who is working as a software engineer. How long is he working? for more than 5 years. Therefore, the conclusion becomes logical. He must be drawing a high salary. When can this argument go wrong? If the generalization is false. It's not necessary that software engineers who are working for Wipro are getting a very high salary of about 10 lakhs, if that goes wrong. When can this argument go wrong? If Gopal is not working for Wipro, or if Gopal is working for Wipro but not as a software engineer, then there is no logic in saying he's drawing a very high salary. So the facts presented must be accurately assessed whether they fit into the argument. Sometimes arguments can have appropriate generalizations and particularizations, but the conclusion still may not be true. Even though there's a syllogism, they may still not be true. When? When can this happen? For example, if I were to give you an argument like this, which is, the first one is a generalization which says all women are brilliant. The second is a particularization which says specifically that I am a woman. Based on these two, the generalization and particularization, I come to a conclusion, therefore I am brilliant. Syllogism is perfect. The logical construction is perfect. But still, do you agree? The men here, do you agree with the argument? This is for you ladies. Huh? Do you agree with the argument? No. Why? Just because you are not a woman? Logic. You tell me why. Why do you disagree with this argument? If you are logical, you would also disagree, right? Tell me why. Where is the problem? Okay, I am a woman is a particularization. You see me standing in front of you, so there's no doubt about that. So where is the problem then? In the generalization which says all women are brilliant. Now this is a generalization that cannot be accepted, because facts will show you that it is contradictory. Some women are brilliant, some are clever, some are not. Now let me tell you the story behind this generalization. I went to Stanford, Berkeley, and I conducted a GRE test for all the women in this particular college. Every student of Berkeley, every lady who took the GRE test, she got a score of 330 plus on the GRE. Based on that, I am saying, therefore, all women are brilliant. Now tell me why I am still wrong. Based on the study that I conducted, where all the women students there took the GRE test and got a score of 330 plus out of possible 340. So I am concluding, therefore, all women are brilliant. Where am I still wrong? Yes, absolutely. My survey was done in one specific college, and you should understand, if these girls are studying there in that college, they must be brilliant. So to take a test there of these students and then to generalize on their performance for all the students who are going to be taking the GRE, and therefore thinking that every girl who's going to take the GRE is going to get 330 plus is illogical. Therefore, this generalization is done on an incomplete study. So this itself is not accurate. So though the syllogism is working, this conclusion is doubtful. It is dubious. It cannot be. So using your critical reasoning, your logical assessment of this argument, you would say, I do not accept this particular conclusion because this generalization is too narrow and it cannot be acceptable for all women. So the generalization is not working, therefore the conclusion becomes illogical. Let's take another simple argument. Premise 1 says bribery is a corrupt practice. Giving donations is a bribe. Conclusion. Therefore, giving, come on, give me the answer. Donations is a corrupt practice. Okay, let's assess. Let us critically assess this conclusion. Now, the generalization is a common statement. All forms of bribery, whether you give bribe or you take bribe, is corrupt. There is no doubt about premise number 1. Now we come to a specific type of bribe, and that is giving donations. And you are saying that giving donations is a bribe. Let's assess the statement. What is giving donations? When do we give donations? Let's talk about instances of giving donations. This parent takes a son who's not qualified in any of the entrance exams to this college, engineering college, and the college says, I'm sorry, we cannot give him admission just like that, but if you give us a building donation of 10 lakhs, we might consider him for admission. So the father writes a check for 10 lakhs and the son gets an admit into this particular college. What would you call this giving building donation to the college? You'd call it a bribe. This person is getting a seat which he doesn't deserve. Another student who's not capable of paying that 10 lakhs may not get the seat, though he may deserve to be in the college. So would you call this giving donations to be a bribe? Yes. But let's say this terrible calamity happened in the coastal region, a cyclone, and this person writes a check for 5,000 rupees and sends it to this organization which is helping those people who are suffering from the calamity. He sends a donation for 5,000 rupees in what? In charity, to help support these people. Would you call this sending of this 5,000 rupees as a donation as a bribe? No. No, you wouldn't. Therefore, to say that giving donations is a corrupt practice just like that becomes illogical. But in this argument, you can do a modification. You can make it more specific. What can you do? You can specify when you give donations as a bribe, it is corrupt. But when you give donations as charity, it cannot be classified as corrupt practice. So this argument's conclusion can be accepted only partially. In this argument, the argument's conclusion, therefore all bats are warm-blooded, can be accepted totally. In this argument, this particular argument's conclusion can be discarded as illogical because the generalization doesn't work for all. In this particular argument, because the specification is again not being very precise, the conclusion is only partially correct. It doesn't work in all instances of giving donations. So you see, we have critically evaluated, assessed. What did we assess? The argument's claim or conclusion. On what basis did we assess? On the basis of the premises that have been provided. Whether those premises are relevant to the conclusion, whether those premises are accurate, whether those premises are giving us a complete support to the conclusion. We have done a basic, what you call as critical evaluation of these arguments. Now, these are very simple arguments. These are called as deductive arguments. Deductive arguments have only two components, which is what I gave you, the C plus the P. What is the C plus the P? The claim or conclusion plus the premises. The arguments that come on critical reasoning, on GRE analytical writing, as well as many times in their short passages, are not so simple. The arguments that you get on GRE are mostly what we call as inductive. What are they called? Inductive arguments. These are the more complex reasoning, because in inductive arguments, all facts are not given to you before reaching a conclusion. Some facts are taken for granted to reach a conclusion. So in inductive argument, premises are there leading to a conclusion, but the premises that are given are not completely covering all the facts to reach the conclusion, because in every argument, the argument takes certain things for granted to reach that conclusion. Those things that have been taken for granted to reach the conclusion, we call in these arguments as assumptions. So these assumptions lie between the premises and the conclusions. How do I define the assumptions? The assumptions are also premises. What are premises? You tell me again. Facts, evidences, any kind of information that is used to back your conclusion or claim are the premises. How do you distinguish the assumption from the premises? The assumptions can be defined as unspoken, unstated, implicit premises. How do you define the assumption? The assumption can be defined as unspoken, unstated, implicit premises. Okay. Today we are all sitting in this class. Everything is enclosed. We are sitting in a hall where you can't see what's happening outside. After the class is over, you step outside and you make an observation. You make an observation that in your absence, when you were in the class, something has happened, which is all the roads have become wet. What did you observe? All the roads are wet. Based on the observation that the roads have all become wet, you turn to your friend and say, it must have rained when we were in the class. So, the observation is the premise. The roads are wet. The conclusion is, it must have rained when we were in the class. But to reach this conclusion, that it must have rained, you have taken something for granted, which is your assumption. What could that be? Premise, the road is wet. Conclusion, therefore it must have rained. This is the conclusion. But to reach this conclusion, there's something that has to be filled in here. Something that you took for granted. What did you see after all? Did you see it raining? What did you see? You saw the road is wet. It's not raining anymore. You are seeing the road is wet. You're reaching the conclusion, if the road is wet, it must have. It is rain that has made the road wet. That means what did you take for granted? Nothing else except rain can make this road wet. 100 things can make the road wet. There is a leaking pipe over there, a drainage pipe that has flooded the entire road. That could have made the road wet. It need not have rain. So the assumption you have made, the unspoken premise that you have taken for granted is the road can get wet only, this is the condition, when it rains. This is what you have taken as a condition. And based on that you have concluded, therefore it must have rained. Let's take a typical situation in my house. Let's say I've invited somebody over to my house as a guest, an overnight guest from outstation. But it so happens that just before this person is going to arrive, I have a very urgent work, I'm leaving. I go out, but I have a servant at home, so I tell this person, please invite the guest when he comes. Tell him sorry that I was called on a very urgent job. Serve dinner and show him the guest bedroom. I'll come and meet him as soon as I come. These are my instructions and I go. I come back a bit late. It's almost 10 o'clock by the time I return. The first thing I do when I reach my home is I go to the dining hall. What do I see? I see that food has been served and dinner has been eaten. Based on this observation, I conclude my guest has arrived, had dinner, and now he must be resting in the guest bedroom. This is my conclusion. But to reach this conclusion, what are the facts? What are the things I've taken for granted? What assumptions have I made? What did I say? I never said, when I saw the food was served and eaten, I didn't say somebody had food. That would be a deductive argument. When you see food has been eaten, the best you can conclude is someone ate the food. But I saw the food eaten and I'm concluding the guest has eaten dinner and is sleeping now. That means what did I take for granted? That my servant has served food only for the invited guest. I'm assuming nobody else came to my house in my absence and had dinner. The servant himself did not sit and have dinner. You got the point? If dinner has been served, it has been served only because of the invited guest has arrived. So the assumption here is the food has been only served to the guest. Therefore, my guest has arrived becomes a logical conclusion. Now, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about these assumptions? Because one of the major questions that you're going to answer, one of the major things you need to have to learn to understand how to pick out is the assumption. In critical reasoning, the first question that you will be most often asked on any typical critical reasoning passages would be, what do you think this particular paragraph is taking for granted to reach this conclusion? Which of the following answers must be true for the argument to be logical? What is an assumption made by the argument. What must be supposed to be correct for the argument to be logical? That means in the question types, the first type of question that we are going to have to learn to be able to identify are the assumption questions. Now, let us connect it with writing. In the analysis of an argument, every topic that you get is an argument. Every topic makes a claim and there are facts given to support that argument. What are you asked to do? You are asked to write like what we did now, a critical evaluation of how far the claim or conclusion reached by that argument is logical. Now, every argument is an inductive one. That means what must you do for the conclusion to be logical? You need to find out what assumptions have been made by this argument for this argument's conclusion to be logical. So either way, on both your writing as well as on your verbal reasoning short passages, assumptions become very, very important for you to be able to identify. So we need to train ourselves to be able to identify the assumptions. So let us put a very, very simple argument here. Premise 1. Now, this particular person, Cortez, was supposed to have discovered the southern part of America. So he arrived in Mexico in 1519 AD. This is fact number 1, premise number 1. Premise number 2, he saw the natives playing a game with a rubber ball. This is premise number 2. Premise number 3, rubber was used by the natives from 1000 AD. This is premise number 3. Based on these 3 facts, this argument reaches a conclusion. The conclusion is, therefore, the game must have originated between 1000 AD and 1519 AD. This is what the argument reaches as a conclusion. So what are the facts before us? The facts are very straightforward. Cortez arrived in Mexico in 1519 AD. What did he see when he arrived? That the natives were already playing a game with a rubber ball. One more additional information about the natives is given. When did they start using rubber? They started using rubber from 1000 AD. Based on this, the conclusion about the game is, this game could not have originated after 1519 AD. Why? Because already it was being played by the natives when Cortez arrived. But in order to tell you that this game could not have originated before 1000 AD, what is the fact given to us? That rubber was used by the natives from 1000 AD. How is that relevant to this argument? Why are we told about rubber here? Because the game was played with a rubber ball. So if the natives started using rubber from 1000 AD and the game is played with a rubber ball, then this game could not have originated before 1000 AD is the conclusion. But to reach this conclusion, this argument is taking one more premise which is hidden for granted, which is your assumption. What is another fact that has to be true for this conclusion to be logical? You think and tell me. What has to be true? For the game to have been originated before 1519, there is no doubt. Facts are there. But to say that this game could not have originated before 1000 AD, this argument is taken something for granted. It's assuming something. And what was that? It's assuming something about the game. What is that? It uses rubber. Yes, it uses rubber. But go a little more. Absolutely. Why only rubber? Why not something else? Exactly. The fact is, this argument is taken for granted that this game has always been played only with a rubber ball. That's why he's cutting off the date and saying, if rubber was used by these natives only from 1000 AD, therefore this game could not have originated before rubber was known to the natives. So the point here is, the assumption is, the game was always played only using a rubber ball. This is the assumption on which this particular argument conclusion is hinged, isn't it? If it is proved that this game was only played with a rubber ball, then this game could not have originated before 1000 AD, right? So what is the assumption once again? That this game was played only with a rubber ball right from its inception. That is the assumption. Now, let's go one step further. Tell me, what if true would weaken this conclusion that this game could not have originated before 1000 AD? What if true? Anything that proves the assumption to be false will weaken the argument's conclusion. So what can weaken the argument's conclusion? Any fact that disproves the assumption. Suppose you are told that the natives already knew how to extract cork from trees much before 1000 AD, and cork can be made into excellent balls, then it does cast doubt on this argument's conclusion. It could be possible. Initially they played with cork balls and then they turned over to rubber balls. So the next most important thing that you need to learn in critical reasoning is how to weaken an argument. So the first way in which one can weaken an argument, I said this, if it is proved to be, what is proved to be false? If the assumption is proved to be false, the argument's conclusion becomes utterly and totally illogical. Totally illogical. How can you prove the assumption to be false? Either by giving information that contradicts the assumption, or by also proving that the assumption itself is false. So here what can you do? Any information that says that they could have played with some other material ball would definitely weaken. How to? Now we go to the reverse side. How to strengthen the argument? If you are able to prove the natives knew no other substance with which to make a ball except rubber, then it becomes further concretized that they must have started playing this game only from 1000 AD, because the only substance they knew how to make into a ball is rubber, and rubber was known to the natives only from 1000 AD. That means from the very inception the rubber ball was used. That means how did you strengthen the argument? By proof. What do you prove true? The assumption. When you prove the assumption true, then the argument's conclusion becomes additionally strengthened. So three things. First, we drew the assumption. Two, we weakened the argument's conclusion by proving the assumption false. Three, we strengthened the argument's conclusion by proving the assumption to be a fact, because assumption is unstated. When the moment you make that assumption into a statistical information or a fact, then automatically the argument's conclusion becomes 100% logical. Let us take one more argument. Premise number 1. The average life expectancy for the people of United States is, let's say, 73 years. Premise number 2, the average life expectancy for the people of Hawaii is 77 years. Premise number 3, the average life expectancy for the people of Louisiana is 71 years. This is the statistical information given to us. Based on this statistical information, the argument reaches a certain speculative conclusion. The argument says, if a married couple were to move from Louisiana to Hawaii, then the children born in Hawaii will have a longer life expectancy. The children born in Hawaii will have a longer life expectancy. This is the speculative conclusion reached by the argument. So what are the facts before us? The average life expectancy overall for the people of US is 73 years. For the people of Hawaii, it's much, much longer. It is 77 years. For the people of Louisiana, it is only 71 years. So based on these statistical facts, the argument speculates and says, if a couple were to move from Louisiana to Hawaii, based on the statistical information, the conclusion is the children born in Hawaii will have a longer lifespan. But to reach this conclusion, this argument is making a certain assumption. And I want you to think and tell me what that assumption could be. What has been taken for granted to say, therefore the children born in Hawaii would have a longer lifespan. See, logic is common sense. Logic means you should use your mind to think with a little bit of knowledge and information you have around you. Common sense tells you by merely moving from one place to another, you may or may not necessarily get benefited. Let's say we are all living in Hyderabad, highly polluted, and let us say I am suffering from all kinds of pollution related diseases. I get, breathing problems, I get colds, I get coughs, I get all kinds of problems, and I'm always on medication. I relocate from here one fine day and go away to Vancouver, one of the cleanest cities in the world, let's say. The moment I go there, all my related, diseases disappear and my health becomes extremely good. As a result of that, what will happen to my lifespan? Increase. So, when will my lifespan increase? Just because I shifted from Hyderabad to Vancouver, when will my lifespan in Vancouver increase? If the conditions are much better than Hyderabad. You got the point? So here, for this couple to move from Louisiana to Hawaii, to be able to get benefited from that and the children to have longer life, what have you taken? Now let me be more specific. What have you taken for granted about Hawaii's environmental conditions? That it is much cleaner and healthier than Louisiana. The assumption you have made is the people of Louisiana have a shorter lifespan in comparison to Hawaii because the environmental conditions in Louisiana are polluted and unfavorable for a longer life. In comparison, Hawaii has cleaner and better environment leading to longer life. So the assumption made is Hawaii has better environment, mental conditions leading to more healthy lives and longer lifespans. Right? This is the assumption that has been made, that Hawaii, when compared to Louisiana, has better environment leading to more healthy lives and therefore longer lifespans. Now this is the assumption. Now the next question you are asked, let us say, is what would weaken this argument's conclusion? What would you say would weaken this argument's conclusion? What did I say? How to weaken an argument? Prove the assumption false. You got that? The moment you prove the assumption to be false, the argument's conclusion becomes false. It becomes illogical. So how can you prove it? Give additional information. What additional information would you give? That the environmental factors in Hawaii, yes, are as polluted or as unhealthy as Louisiana. Right? That is one way in which you're directly proving the assumption to be false. So what you did in order to weaken is you proved false. You proved the assumption to be false. How else can you weaken the argument? Give additional information that does what? That refutes the argument. It's conclusion. What is the meaning of the word refute? Proves it false. Suppose I were to say something like, the people of Hawaii live longer due to genetic factors. What would this do? Weaken. How did you weaken the argument? Not just attacking the assumption, but giving an additional information that says it's not the environmental factors that is leading to longer life for the people of Hawaii. What is leading? Genetic factors. Just merely because this couple is moving from Louisiana to Hawaii, do you think this genetic factors is going to help their children? Not at all. So this additional factors for the reason why the people of Hawaii have a longer lifespan completely refutes the assumption that it is the environment that must be leading to longer life. Therefore weakens the argument's conclusion. So two ways you have weakened the argument. How? One, by proving the assumption to be false by giving contradictory information to the assumption. Two, by proving the assumption to be false by giving information that additional information that refutes the assumption by telling you something more that casts doubt on the assumption, thereby leading to the argument's conclusion becoming illogical. So we have weakened this argument in two ways. How do we strengthen the argument? The opposite. Prove the assumption to be a fact. Survey study made in Hawaii proves that the environmental factors in Hawaii are much more cleaner, healthier in comparison to Louisiana. When you are given this survey result, this environmental study that has been made, what does it make you do? It makes you confirm the argument's conclusion that definitely if this couple were to move from Louisiana to Hawaii, definitely they and their children will get positively impacted by this move. So in order to prove the assumption to be the argument to be true or strengthen it, you need to prove the assumption to be true. Any additional information can also further strengthen. For example, you can give some kind of statistical information. So many people in Louisiana suffer from pollution-related diseases. In comparison, statistical information shows that very few people in Hawaii suffer from pollution-related disease. So what does that mean? It means Hawaii definitely is safer for you to live and leading to a healthier and longer life. So any additional information that further confirms the existing facts will strengthen the argument. So the three major things that you need to train yourself to do when you're doing critical reasoning is, you need to train yourself to be able to extract the assumption, you need to be able to weaken the argument, you need to be able to strengthen the argument. Some arguments can be merely deductive. Facts can be given to you. There also you can be asked, how do you strengthen the argument? How do you weaken? Any information that further adds, for example, something as simple as you went out, you saw the road was wet, and you came to the conclusion that it must have rained. You assumed the road can get wet only when it rains. But other than this, what could have strengthened this particular argument would be if you made some additional observations. Suppose not only is the road wet, the buildings are wet, the trees are wet, the sky is cloudy. What does it do? It confirms your observation and proves it to be true. Any kind of additional facts that are added, confirming and supporting, will always strengthen. Contradictory observations or facts will weaken. Suppose only the road is wet, everything else is dry. The buildings are dry, the tree is dry, the sky is without a single cloud. It proves to you that your assumption may not be true. Something else has made the road wet. If it has rained, then everything else must also be wet as well. So let us take this one particular argument. Let's say this argument gives you a single fact. It says, Louis has just seen a raven. And based on this one fact, this argument says, therefore, the next bird that Louis sees will be a raven. What is the fact before us? What has Louis seen? He has seen a raven. And based on the fact he has seen, say raven is a bird. Okay. It's a kind of a crow-like bird. Now, on the fact that he's already seen one raven, you're predicting the next bird he's going to see is also going to be a raven. Now, let us ask ourselves this question. What would further support and strengthen this argument? If I were to give you, apart from this premise, an additional premise saying, ravens always tend to move in flocks. Suppose this additional information is given to you about the ravens. What does it do about the conclusion? It confirms it. If ravens are birds that move in a flock, in groups, then if you have seen one raven, there's definitely 100% possibility that the next bird you're going to see is going to be a raven. So any additional information supporting the existing facts would strengthen the argument's conclusion. Suppose this particular argument is about not a raven, but a crow. Therefore, I say the next bird that Louis sees will be a crow. Now, how do I weaken it? Crows never tend to move in flocks. Now we are going to take up one other way in which one can strengthen or weaken an argument. And that can be in the form of parallels, analogies. You know, many times when we put across an argument, when we want to convince the other person of an argument, we use parallel examples, illustrations to support our view. Right? Suppose you are having, let's say, a discussion with your parents about your wanting to go to Kashmir for a holiday. Now your parents might be objecting, saying that it's not a safe place to travel right now. Now you tell your parents, last month a group of my friends went to Kashmir for a week. They had a jolly good time and they came back safe and sound. Why are you telling them this example? To prove that tomorrow if you go to Kashmir also, you would have no problems, you would come back safe and sound. So parallels are analogies, parallels are illustrations, examples that we use to support or refute a particular argument's conclusion. Suppose your parents said that, you know, a group of our friends went to Kashmir, they had to cut short their holiday by more than 1 week and come running back because of problems there. What will it do to your claim that you go to Kashmir, you will have no problem? It will weaken it. So parallels can be drawn in order to either confirm an existing fact or refute an existing fact. A particular argument comes up with a contention. The argument is, this group is saying that bats are feared and persecuted only because they are shy creatures seen only in the night. So the argument put forward by this particular conservation group, this group of people, is that bats are feared and persecuted. Persecuted, killed, harassed, only for one reason. Why? Because bats are shy creatures and they are seen only in the night, so we fear them and we therefore kill them, we persecute them. Now the question is, what we can do two things. What can weaken and what can strengthen. How do I weaken? If I give you this fact. See, here, if these are, let's come to the assumption. If these are the two reasons why bats are feared and persecuted, only two reasons. See, this only is very clear. Then, the assumption is every creature that is shy and seen at night must also be feared and persecuted. That's the assumption, right? You have to therefore believe every animal that is shy and seen at night would be feared and persecuted. Any kind of deviation from that assumption would weaken the argument. Suppose I were to tell you raccoons and owls are creatures are shy creatures seen only at night, but they are neither feared nor persecuted. What will this fact do to this argument's conclusion? Weaken it. How did we weaken this argument? By drawing a parallel between bats and owls and raccoons. We are proving that owls and raccoons are also shy creatures. They are also only visible in the night time. But are we scared of them? Are we persecuting them? No. That means it proves that bats are feared and persecuted not only for these reasons. There is something else about bats that is making us fear and persecute them. Therefore, this analogy, this parallel, weakens the argument's claim about bats being persecuted only because of that one reason. What would have strengthened this argument? If I said the reverse. Raccoons and owls are also shy creatures seen at night. They are also feared and persecuted, will further strengthen the argument put forward by the conservation group. You got the point? So one additional way in which one can weaken or strengthen an argument is by drawing parallels. Any parallel that confirms the existing fact will strengthen the argument. Any parallel that will refute the existing fact will weaken the argument's conclusion. So these are the three basic cornerstones for you to learn, for you to put a firm foundation, for you to get any kind of expertise or proficiency on arguments. But these are not the only types of questions that come on critical reasoning. You could get any type of question based on common sense, your ability to draw conclusions. So you could also be given facts and you could be asked to draw a conclusion based on facts. Premise 1, premise 2, premise 3 is given. And you'll be asked, what can one conclude from the facts given? So conclusion based questions are very, very often asked. What do you think would be the logical conclusion? What is the author intending to come to as a conclusion as a result of the facts presented? So therefore, conclusion is a common fact. You can also have questions based on inference. Now here, I want to be very, very clear. Never ever confuse inference with assumption. Let me once again have your idea about an assumption. Tell me, what is an assumption? An assumption is an unspoken, unstated what? Premise. An assumption is a premise. Why is it different from a premise? Because it's not stated. It is implicit. It is unstated. So an assumption and a premise can work together because both are facts leading to a conclusion. Assumption is different because it's not stated. It's not written down anywhere. It is taken for granted. Then what is an inference? An inference can be called as a minor conclusion. What did I say? Yes. An inference is a minor conclusion. See, conclusion is when you add premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, and then you reach the conclusion. That means this conclusion is based on all the three facts. That is the major conclusion. But many times, you can just take one fact, one premise, and draw what is called as not a conclusion, but an inference. Inferences are reading between the lines. You know, you can study something. For example, I can study a situation. I can look at a person. This person is wearing a sweater. I can say the weather conditions are cold. But in addition to that, I do some more observations. Not only is the person wearing a sweater, he's sniffing, he's got a red nose, and his eyes are watering. What does that tell me? Not only is the weather chill, but he's got some kind of an infection. So therefore, you see, conclusion would be where you add up all the facts. Inference would be where you take one fact and from there you draw a minor conclusion. An argument says that a particular university in Midwest in the US does not do the kind of admission, let us say, fraud that other universities do. I wouldn't call it as fraud, what you call as inappropriate admission behavior of the other universities. In this university, we are told that unlike other universities, if a student has to get an admission, even if he is an athlete, he must first provide his academic certificates, and then based on his athletic performance, he would be given a scholarship. Okay. Unlike the procedure connected with the other universities, this Midwest university doesn't have, let me once again tell you the facts, doesn't have a nexus, a connection between the admission office and the athletic office. In this university, a student who seeks admission must get admission first on his academic performance, then he applies to the athletic office and gets himself, based on his athletic performance, any kind of scholarship. By doing this, this university intends to avoid the kind of recruitment violations that are found in other universities, is the conclusion. Now, a question that is asked is, what is an inference that is drawn from this particular argument? Inference. Now, this is a very general question. One of the options says that in other universities where such violations take place, a student gets his admission and scholarship without having a strong academic performance. A student who's an athlete gets an admission and a scholarship without having a strong academic performance. That is the inference to be drawn. You got the point? That means if this university is trying to avoid those violations, that means other universities are violating those rules. They are giving an athlete admission and scholarship without looking at his academic performance. So therefore, inferences can be drawn as minor conclusions. Apart from inferences, many questions will ask you to find out what are the flaws or errors or absurdities in the argument. What are flaws? Flaws can be called as errors in reasoning. These errors in reasoning leads to the argument becoming flawed, illogical. Because of these errors in reasoning, many of these arguments end up being illogical, flawed. Therefore, the conclusion becomes illogical. So one of the things that can weaken an argument can be these flaws in reasoning. Now, there are many questions that we'll be doing in the class which deals with these kind of errors in reasoning that makes the argument's conclusion illogical. There can be innumerable types of flaws. They can be flaws based on numbers. They can be flaws based on generalizations. They can be flaws reached by drawing what you call as wrong kind of illogical conclusions. So we need to be able to pinpoint those flaws and we need to train ourselves. A particular argument says that, let me put it this way, 100 road accidents occur in Hyderabad every month. 98 road accidents occur every month in Mumbai. Therefore, it is as dangerous to be driving in Hyderabad as it is in Mumbai. This is my conclusion. This is my conclusion. How many accidents have happened every month on an average in Hyderabad? 100. Almost close to that, 98 accidents on an average in Mumbai. So I'm saying that both the cities are equally dangerous. Now I want you to tell me what could be a possible error that leads to this particular conclusion, which is illogical actually. Facts. You're just given the total number of accidents. What do you need? Minor accidents, major accidents? No, I'm not bothered about minor or major. I'm talking about accidents per se. Okay.
It's about the roads or the laws. The total number of vehicles.
Absolutely. So here you see 100 road accidents occur in Hyderabad every month, no doubt. But the point is, how many cars or vehicles are plying on Hyderabad's roads? Let's say at any given point of time, let's say 5 lakh cars are in the city's road. How many cars are plying in Mumbai? At any given point of time, there are 10 lakh cars on Mumbai's road. What does it now tell you? That this conclusion is illogical. Definitely, Hyderabad is more dangerous than Mumbai. Why? Out of 5 lakh cars, the accidents are 100. Out of 10 lakh cars, the accidents are 98. Here, the argument commits the illogical thinking. The flaw is of assuming that both the cities, they have only same number of cars. Therefore, merely comparison of numbers will tell us which is more safe or which is less safe. Whereas, in reality, you cannot compare accidents. What should you compare? Out of so many cars, how many accidents? Right? So, if this is it, then this is twice as dangerous as Mumbai. So, this is one of the basic flaws. An example of that I'm giving you, where you will have to say that instead of comparing the numbers, one has to compare out of 1,000 cars, how many accidents are occurring. You got the point. Then you would get a safer or a more precise idea about which particular city is safer and which is less safe. You got the point. Okay. So flaws and errors can be of various types. We will practice with as many questions as possible to be able to identify these flaws, and thereby we can answer those questions. Apart from this, which are the set questions, the critical reasoning questions can be common sense questions. Any kind of questions can be asked. It's a question of understanding, analyzing, interpreting, and more importantly, understanding the question that will help us to be able to tackle these problems. So, short passages can be very, very challenging. But logic is something that we can train ourselves on. Suppose we get that logic in place, tackling these particular passages becomes easy. Remember, when they are grading these questions in difficulty level, the questions that come from short passages are graded as more difficult than questions that come from long passages, because the short passages questions are the ones that involve a lot of reasoning skills. And where reasoning skills is concerned, you need to train yourself. You need to practice. The more you practice, the more you become capable of understanding the logic, you'll be able to answer these questions. Okay? Done this, but let's discuss it quickly. The average life expectancy for the United States population as a whole is 73.9 years, but children born in Hawaii will live an average of 77 years, and those born in Louisiana 71.7 years. If a newlywed couple from Louisiana were to begin their family in Hawaii, therefore, their children would be expected to live longer than would be the case if the family remained in Louisiana. So which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the conclusion drawn in the passage? We already learned that the assumption made here is the reason why the people of Hawaii have a longer life is because of certain external factors. The environment might be better, thereby people moving from Louisiana to Hawaii, they would get benefited and they would have a longer life. What would weaken the argument? 1, proving the assumption false. 2, giving any additional information that would cast doubt on the assumption. So among the 5 options given here, the best answer that completely destroys the argument is C. The longevity ascribed to Hawaii's current population is attributable mostly to genetically determined factors. So option C gives you one additional information that proves the longevity ascribed to the people of Hawaii is not because of the environment, but because of their genes. Therefore, merely moving from Louisiana to Hawaii would not benefit the family or their children. The answer is C. See, the other options might weaken, but I would like to tell you what will most weaken will be the one which attacks the assumption. So option C becomes the best of the options before us. The second question, insurance company X is considering issuing a new policy to cover services required by elderly people who suffer from diseases that afflict the elderly. Premiums for the policy must be low enough to attract customers. Therefore, Company X is concerned that the income from the policies would not be sufficient to pay for the claims that would be made. So what are the facts before us? This Company X wants to add some more customers by introducing this particular policy to cover services for the elderly people who suffer from diseases that afflict the elderly. But the problem is, what will happen when you cover the elderly? One is they would fall sick and make claims. Second, to attract the customers, you also need to keep the premiums low. So the problem will be you keep the premiums low and these elderly people immediately claim, the company will face losses. So the question is, which of the following strategies would be most likely to minimize Company X's losses on the policies? This is a common sense question. Your common sense tells you E cannot be right. E says, I'm going to read the options. Option E says, insuring only those individuals who are wealthy enough to pay for the medical services. Now, insurance is taken by everyone. That doesn't mean just because I'm rich, I can pay for my health bills. I've taken an insurance and I will tell the company, you don't pay for my health bills. You got the point? The moment you take an insurance, whether you're rich or poor, you will make a claim. So option E says, wealthy enough to pay for the medical services doesn't mean that they will not make a claim on the company for the medical bills. So E cannot be the correct answer. Any other choice? For example, option B says, insuring only those individuals who did not suffer any serious disease as children. Would that ensure the company is going to get profits? The point here is, we are now insuring the elderly people. They did not have any diseases when they were young. That doesn't mean they're not going to get diseases when they grow older. The sicknesses that afflict the children are not necessarily the same sicknesses that will afflict the elderly. So just because an elderly person did not have diseases in his childhood, there's no guarantee he won't get diseases when he becomes older. So B does not tell us that this option will minimize the company's profit. Therefore, the common sense answer I would go with is option A. Attracting middle-aged customers unlikely to submit claims for benefits for many years. So instead of going to the very old, go to the middle-aged. For at least 4 or 5 years, they'll pay the premiums. Then they might fall sick and ask for the claim. So that means the company makes some profits out of these premiums. You got that? Okay. The third question. A program instituted in a particular state allows parents to prepay the children's future college tuition at current rates. The program then pays the tuition annually for the child at any of the state's public college in which the child enrolls. Parents should participate in the program as a means of decreasing the cost for their children's college education. So what is the claim made by this argument? That parents should take part in this program. Why should they participate in this program? In order to save money. Because what does this program do? Today, if you put the money on the current college rate, tuition fees, tomorrow, let's say 5 years from now, when your child is going to college, and whatever may be the tuition fee at that time, which will definitely increase over a period of time, this particular program will reimburse you for that particular extra fees. Therefore, the advice given by this argument is that parents should participate in this program in order to save money. Now, which of the following, if true, is the most appropriate reason for parents not to participate in the program? So this question is indirectly asking you to weaken. This argument is advising you to take part in the program in order to save money. This particular question is asking you why or what would be a reason for you not to take part in the program. That means you either show that you're losing money in this program, or you could also show there's something else that gives you better benefits than this program. And that answer is yes, option B. Option B. The amount of money accumulated by putting the prepayment funds in an interest-bearing account today will be greater than the total cost of tuition for any of the public colleges when the child enrolls. You see, instead of putting my money in the funds, today let's say the college fees, tuition fees around 5 lakh rupees, I put it in an FD. 5 years from now when my child goes to the college, the tuition fee at that time is, let's say, 8 lakh rupees. So this 5 lakh will become 8 lakh rupees if I put it in the program. But if I put it in an FD in this 5 years, my 5 lakh will become 10 lakhs. So which is fetching me more? Putting it in a prepayment funds. So this would be a reason why I would not want to go and put my money in the prepayment funds. So B is weakening the advice given by the argument to participate in the program. The fourth question. Company Alpha buys free travel coupons from people who are awarded the coupons by Bravo Airlines for flying frequently on Bravo Airlines. The coupons are sold to people who pay less for the coupons than they would pay by purchasing tickets from Bravo. This marketing of coupons results in lost revenue for Bravo. So, Alpha is doing something unethical. It is buying the free travel coupons that Bravo is giving to its frequent travelers and it is selling them. Thereby, the company is losing money on this marketing and selling of free coupons. Now, the question is, to discourage the buying and selling of free travel coupons, it would be best for Bravo Airlines to restrict the, let's put it in this way. What do you think Bravo Airlines should do to stop Alpha Airlines from buying the tickets and selling it, thereby costing Bravo Airlines loss, isn't it? What do you think it should do? What should it restrict? Would you say by restricting option A, number of coupons that a person can be awarded in a particular year? It will not completely stop the problem. Suppose a frequent flyer is now given 10 coupons. Later on, because of this problem, he is given only 2 coupons. He is still going to go and sell those 2 coupons to Alpha. So this problem is not going to be completely solved. So A is not our answer. What do you think is the answer? B it is. Restrict the, Bravo should do what? Bravo Airlines should restrict the use of the coupons to those who are awarded the coupons and members of their immediate family. So, if you are a frequent traveler on Bravo and Bravo gives you those free coupons and says, these free coupons only you can travel on, or your immediate family members are only eligible to travel, then what will happen? Then nobody can go and sell these coupons to Bravo Airlines. You got the point. So B would completely, totally stop the problem from occurring. So B would be the best answer. Any other choices you think? All the other choices, C, D and E, will restrict partially, not totally. The answer is B. The fifth question. The ice on the front windshield of the car had formed when moisture condensed during the night. The ice melted quickly after the car was warmed up the next morning because the defrosting vent, which blows only on the front windshield, was turned on full force. So what are the facts before us? The fact is the ice formed on the front windshield of the car during the night time. And what did they do in order to defrost it? Remove the ice on the front windshield. They used a defrosting vent. Where was the defrosting vent blowing hot air? Only on the front windshield. Because of which he says, because of the defrosting vent, the ice on the car windows melted so fast is his claim. Now, the question is, which of the following, if true, most seriously jeopardizes the validity of the explanation for the speed with which the ice melted? Let's first understand the question. What is the meaning of the word jeopardize? Anything that threatens, anything that will put you in danger, anything in this context, weaken. Weaken what? Weaken what? The validity of the explanation. What is validity? The truth of what is the explanation given? That it is because of the defrosting vent, the ice melted on the car windows. That means, what is the simple way of translating this question? What would weaken the explanation given by the argument for why the ice melted on the car windows. What is the reason given? It is because of the defrosting vent. Where is the defrosting vent blowing here? Only on the front windshield. When I told you about how to weaken an argument, one of the ways I said you can weaken an argument is by giving any extra information that refutes the facts. I gave you this argument about the raven. What did Louis do? He saw a raven. What did you predict? The next bird he sees will be a raven. How did you strengthen it? By proving that ravens always move in flocks. Here, what is that extra information that is provided in the answer options that shows that the explanation given that it is because of the defrosting vent the ice on the car windows has melted? Which particular information refutes that? B it is. Common sense should tell you when the defrosting vent is blowing on the front windshield, the hot air is directly blowing there, then which particular windows ice should melt first? The front one. Then the hot air will disperse in the car, and then the side windows and the back windshield ice will get melted. What does option B tell you? Even though no attempt was made to defrost the back window, the ice there melted at the same rate as did the ice on the front windshield. What does that tell you? That there must be something else that is making the ice melt on the windows. So it's not just the defrosting vent, something else along with the defrosting vent is melting the ice. So B seriously refutes the conclusion reached. So that is the answer.